Hey there, friends. Welcome back to the Construction Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Bradley Hartman. On this show, we bring you insights and ideas from experts across the country every single week to help you lead more effectively. This episode is brought to you by the Simple Sales Pipeline. If you are not organizing and valuing your sales pipeline per individual rep, you are flying blind into an uncertain future. You can solve that in under 30 minutes per month for under $30 per month. You can go to thesimpleSalesPipeline.com to learn more. Well, today you are going to listen or see this conversation I had with one of my favorite people on earth. Her name is Catherine Wheeler. She was a longtime HR leader for Sherwin-Williams. We go way back with her and them, and she's become a friend. She is so smart when it comes to business, whether it's people, whether it's organizational structure, whether it's helping drive growth, whether that's individual people or it's revenues and profits. She's just someone that you want to know you can learn a lot from. So she recently launched her own company. She has other things going on. You can learn more at pivot180.com. It's all spelled out, so you have to slow down a little bit. Pivot, P-I-V-O-T, and then O-N-E, and then 80 spelled out.com. In this episode, we cover a lot of territory, but it all really circles around leadership and succession planning and helping build long-term teams. So we start this conversation talking about the number one challenge that she has had working with leaders. That kind of dives into some summer camp ideas that I think might be interesting for you and your organization to think about. We also kind of dive into how leaders can really think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, which I know is something a lot of us have talked about. It's been all in the news. What Catherine is going to do is really break down how she, in her career, has really benefited from leaders bringing her up and how you can take intentional steps to move forward, to make it a reality, to ultimately grow your business, attract new talent, and make more money. So we cover all of that and more. If you have not listened to episode 81, which came out way back in 2019, I had Catherine on the show. I went back and re-listened to that. I learned a lot from our conversation. I also learned that I also didn't ask a lot of important questions, and part of which we solved in this episode. So if you haven't listened to episode 81, go back. I promise you that's going to be worth your time. But otherwise, you, my friend, are in for a treat. If you are just listening to this, check out YouTube. We have recorded this video to make it easier for you to share insights. If you're watching this, well, you've already figured it out. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Catherine Wheeler of Pivot 180. Miss Catherine Wheeler, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Bradley. So happy to be here.
Two-timers club here. So congratulations. Somewhere there's a big green jacket we're going to give you. That's going to be ill-fitting. That's what you get for coming back twice. But so let's start here. I'm excited to have you. Name of your new company is Pivot 180, which is good because I feel sometimes like me and my organization, we struggle to like pivot 5. Like 5 degrees is just trying to be what we're trying to do, but we struggle with that.
Well, some people want to go 360. I get people asking me, why is it not Pivot 360? I'm like, well, first of all, did you show up to math class? No, I'm just kidding.
We can take you strategically and put you right back where you start for a large amount of money. We can
for a little small investment of a lot of time and money. Yeah.
That's hilarious. We can deposit you right where you are now. Let's start here. Okay. You were just, as we were talking before we turned the mics and the camera on, you started off a sentence that immediately got my attention. You said, one of the biggest challenges that you've had in your career working with leaders is what? As we were kind of talking about building strong teams and helping people grow, because everybody to some degree who's listening right now is challenged with this generational shift. And a lot of really talented, experienced people with a lot of wisdom who are going to be moving on in 1, 3, 5, 7 years.
Absolutely.
So complete that sentence for me. Biggest challenge with leaders was what?
Biggest challenge with leaders, I think we talked about succession, right? So everyone's trying to figure out who's going to replace like the wealth of knowledge that's preparing to walk out of the door, right? What does that look like? And so it becomes this battle of we don't have time, we don't have resources, but we need to upskill people. We need to sort of pass on these bodies of knowledge. So how do we hold the tension of the two? And my philosophy is always pick your poison, right? Pick your problem, right? Either time is a problem for us, or we're getting serious about succession, and how we engage succession becomes a very intentional effort, right? And so when I've worked with leaders, I've always chosen the latter. Like, we engage succession at all cost, because what we've seen and what the data shows us is when we retain our people, we really get to retain 50 to 200% of also the annual of their salaries, right? We lose that when we lose people. So at the end of the day, I'm all about the people, but I'm about the money too, because business is to make money. And so we've got to think about how we want to spend that money.
Yeah, I think sometimes we forget, we look at the costs that are going out the door. But if you take a step back and you say, all right, let's just think broadly for a moment. What is the most economical way for us to grow?
500%.
Hire smart people,
Yep.
keep them here. But I like what you just said there, where you said, let's pick the problem. Because I think it's easier for people to pick the solution.
500%.
And they'll say, all right, well, if I know that we want to decrease our turnover from 74% down to 50 would be great. But that's picking the solution, not necessarily the problem. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So this comes from my manufacturing background, right? Where when there is a line that goes down, before we start to solution, we're like, where's the bottleneck?
Yeah.
Right? And then it's like, wait, are there multiple bottlenecks? Which one has the greatest impact on what the outcome is? And I think we have to see sort of this leadership solution as the same thing. It's like, where's the real bottleneck? And we also have to assess the impact of each bottleneck. So to your point, sometimes we're solving for things that actually don't move us very far forward, right? But if we sort of re-engineer the way that we're thinking about how we get to solutions, I think we get to solve bigger problems that have bigger impact on like how we move forward as an organization.
You had mentioned something about upskilling, and then I wrote that down. I look up, and you were talking about summer camps.
Yes.
This sounds wonderful. Tell me a little bit about this, where you kind of took this biggest challenge with leaders was really the challenge of saying, hey, I want them to get this upskill and I want them to do this. Yet when the time comes to promote them, you're like, Hartman, he's just not ready.
Not ready.
And you're like, well, he's not ready because you didn't
didn't
enable.
pick this problem.
You didn't pick this problem to make him ready.
That's right.
Tell me about summer camps and upskilling.
Yep. So like I said, we had to choose our problem, and we had a few different problems, right? We had a few different problems. You know, one of the challenges we had was that, you know, the business was, I guess siloed is a fair perspective for those listening. So multiple business units, right? But we also had like multi-generational across business units. We were really fearful of losing a lot of bodies of knowledge in each one of those. You know, employees weren't sort of reaching to go places, or if they were, they weren't familiar with the places they were reaching to go. So, you know, winding that back, we're like, all right, how do we solve for the biggest impact items? So I was like, summer camp. So what summer camp is I had about 16 directors. And sometimes the other piece is we start to solve for the employees, not realizing that our directors and our management team, they actually have a lot of impact. Their body of knowledge has a lot of impact on how employees sort of see their way through their career. So I developed summer camp. It was, I think we created an 8-week sort of interval in the summertime. They weren't active for 8 weeks, but we're like, hey, for 8 weeks, here's what we want you to do. We had this major kickoff. It was opt-in. Directors could sign up if they want to. And essentially what we did was we paired them with another director in the business. And so we said, okay, Bradley, you get to be paired with Catherine. She runs this business. You've never been a part of that business. You run that business. And basically for 3 days, whatever weeks they chose, they went and shadowed. They visited customers. They were in the field. They visited employees. And what that did for us was mind-blowing. It has some unintended, really good consequences. One, as Bradley was in the field, he's now meeting some really great hypo leaders. Okay. We didn't intend for that. But as a result, now Bradley has more people on his radar to bring onto his team. Check. Also, one of the assignments was that Bradley needed to take one business best practice from his peer director. Well, he did that. As a result, they take things from each other. Our business grows in Bradley's business unit. Check, right? But also now Bradley is thinking about even his own career, and he's like, oh, I've been in wood, but I could probably actually switch over to plastics very easily. I see the correlation. So just all of these like benefits stack up. So what does that do for us during succession planning? Now Bradley has expressed interest in this other business unit. So now we can sort of plug and play Bradley in a lot more spaces than we had initially anticipated. And so you take that and you multiply it by 12 directors. And now you've got a succession plan, right? Yeah. Now you've got some interest. Now these conversations involving people in their career becomes a lot easier because we've given exposure. They love the idea and they push it down to the field.
Yeah. So if people are listening and maybe they'll say, hey, Catherine, that's great. You're at Sherwin-Williams, multi-billion-dollar global company, been around for 100 plus years. You don't understand. It's different where I am.
Of course.
That's a single location. We got 50 people. Or I'm actually part of a big organization, but headquarters, dude, they're in like Cleveland, and I'm down here in Nashville, and we're autonomous, and there's some oversight, but we're kind of left to our own devices.
Yeah.
I don't think we can pull that off.
Yeah.
How might you challenge folks to think a little bit differently that this doesn't only come when you have $1 billion organization that has 1,000, employees or locations?
For sure. I think the first thing is pick your problem, right? I think it goes back to that pick the problem you actually want to solve that's going to have the greatest impact. But the second thing I'd say is this was actually across. So I talk about the different directors that were a part of it. Each of them were in a very different business unit. Okay. So we're talking across 3 different business units in 12 different segments. Okay. And the reason why this was so successful is because people didn't think we could do it and that they didn't think it would have an impact, because you're talking about New York to Cleveland to Bentonville, where and so again, we got a lot of good buy-in that like this problem was worth solving. Yep. And we did it.
You had mentioned something about it's rare and somewhat non-obvious that we don't include employees in their own career conversations.
Yeah.
It would seem to be from the outside. If you're an alien that came down and said, how do you guys do business around here? You're like, well, I meet Catherine. I said, hey, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? Yeah. And it's okay if you don't know right now, but we're going to continue to work on this, and I really want to know from you.
Yep.
And yet, lots of careers are mapped out either on paper
500%.
Or in my experience, more often like in the owner or a leader's head.
500%.
It's not even an illustration of that. And then sometimes we surprise it on people, or crazy humans change. Yeah. I'm a different person than when I was 25
and then we feel
or
some
30
kind of
or 40.
way when they don't want to do what we've mapped out in our heads. Yeah. Well, and it's so funny because I think, to your point, a lot of owners or leaders think they are involving people. They're like, no, this would be good for Bradley. I thought about this, and his experiences line up with this. I've been a part of those conversations every time, and I think the challenge with how we're thinking about that is it doesn't make space for us to be creative when we involve other people. When we involve other people, I think we learn different interests, different skill sets. And I also think it's selfish of us. One thing I always ask my leaders is this for us or is this for them? Because a good move meets us in the middle to both. And it actually teeters more on the employee side, right?
Could you maybe, to interrupt you here real quick, give me like an example of that? Because I think there's a fine line. I think that's really important what you said is because I think it's easy for a leader to say, well, of course it's for them. It's their career I'm thinking about.
Yep.
But my guess is you're like, let's hold out a little bit. Let's dig into that.
Let's run that back. Yeah. So an immediate situation popped up when I worked for my previous company, and there's someone, incredibly talented. I'm a fan. Everyone's a fan of this person, and a position opens up, and it is a high-level position. It is a very strategic role. It's an amazing role. But this person, technically, this is a lateral for them, technically. And the argument that we wanted to use was, but it's a different customer and they need this type of experience. And when we really understand skill set and when we really understand competency, then we understand that if someone has a deep competence to be agile and to be detail-oriented, we don't need to keep testing that across business units. That's for us. Because we want that person to go, let's be real, we want them to go into this thing and we want them to prove it out again that they can do it. Or we want to feel good about how they grow this business. Or we want to create stability for the B2B customer on the other side, right? Let's just be frank. That's what it is, right? When in fact, it actually might benefit that person to sit a little bit. And then we say, if we believe the competence is real, then we're going to jump. We're going to jump them maybe 1 or 2 rows ahead. And that's going to be for them because that's going to stretch them. That's going to challenge them. It's going to be more work for us. Absolutely. Because now we're going to have to upskill them. We're going to have to coach them. You know what I mean? And so that's what I think about when I'm like, wait, is that for them or is that for us? It's like who really benefits? Because what I've seen is when we do that, when we make those types of moves, the person has maybe 3 to 6 months of a learning curve. And now they're right back to being as great as we thought they were.
Yep.
Yeah. But if we make that move, sometimes it's that we don't trust our own ability to assess talent, and that insecurity we pass off to the employee. Yeah.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong here. The way I think about that, and a couple current situations come to mind, is there's an unexpected departure of some sort. Or maybe there's a VP of some sort she has a pregnancy coming up. She's going to be out for 4 to 6 months. Mm-hmm. It would be easy to say, you know what, it's plausible that this could be a good move to put this person from here to there for us because we're solving that problem.
Sure.
But to your point, I think that's so powerful is that when someone has proven they have competence or an expertise and that is known, we can manufacture reasons that, of course, this is going to give them exposure, they're going to learn this, or they're going to connect with this different customer because they haven't done that.
Yeah.
When the truth is, no, they're going to adapt. They're going to be really good at that because they already have this. This is who they are.
Yep.
I'm repeating this out loud, soaking this in because it's not something I have thought much about, but I'm thinking just about my own small team right now.
Yep.
Like that's totally true. I think that happens a lot.
And here's the other part of this is everyone's like, I don't have a succession plan. We don't have talent, We created this problem with these types of decisions. We've created this problem where we've taken people through a zillion different roles so they could check a zillion different boxes. And now the way that we've engineered what succession looks like in action, it is catching up with us. And now we literally don't have the people that we feel comfortable because we've not tested people's ability to go from 2 to 5. We've only done 2 to 3.5.
Yeah.
And we felt good about that. So I think, unfortunately, in many organizations, we've created this problem. And the only way to fix it is to re-engineer the talent management process and how we think about what competencies mean. But then to do that, we've now got to back into how we teach managers to recognize talent and to acknowledge talent in the workplace. Yeah.
How would you help a leader who we have a succession plan? We have been thoughtful. We've been underway here.
Yeah.
But as this date approaches, the leader might think, might I consciously or subconsciously manufacture reasons that this individual or this team isn't quite ready because I don't know or I'm not confident in what I'm going to do next.
Yeah. Yeah.
And especially when you have some really good years in the business. Mm-hmm. Now, granted, the pandemic offered a whole variety of really terrible challenges and bad outcomes.
500%.
However, for many folks, we've got people who have been listening. Their businesses have been around for 100 years, and they've never been more profitable.
Yep.
And now I'm the CEO, and I'm looking around, and maybe my name's in the building, maybe not. I'm thinking, do I really, how often can I really golf? Do I really want to put that much time towards traveling with my spouse? And sometimes these folks are finding ways to stick around for, maybe I'll stick around for another year or 2 or 3. And all of a sudden there's ramifications. Say you were able to, speak privately and have them speak candidly and you can be really direct with them. How do you help those leaders that are literally initiating these problems of succession that they already have a plan for and they're really operating them well?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Bradley.
So if I'm a leader and you're like, hey, we've been working together for the last several years.
Yep.
You got a succession plan in place.
Yep.
You just threw the gauntlet down. You just dropped a big hammer in the middle of the table that broke the glass and you said, guess what? I don't think I want to transition out of here in 12 months and have this basically everybody kind of move up into this. That was planned.
Nobody moves because I'm not moving.
Because I'm secretly, this idea of what I'm going to do in the next chapter of my life, I like this chapter I'm in. I don't want to leave just yet.
That's real. Yeah, and I've seen that happen, right? People sort of get, for multiple reasons, the stock market, all these different reasons, people are like, I'm actually just going to sit tight. But I think this is actually, it creates a very opportune time to then rethink about how now do we give people different experiences in the same seat, right? Okay. So it gives us an opportunity to say, okay, and not to be conflated with what we just talked about, with like, we're going to do these like minute moves, but it really is to say, how do we get really innovative about what creating experiential experiences around learning, around training within the workplace? Like, what does that start to look like? Because now with things steady, we get to be more innovative and creative. Like, I think creativity and innovation comes in two ways: chaos and steady, right? And so if we're really steady, then we say, okay, well, what have we not done? Like, what is left to be undone? Let's talk to the people, because even though you're not moving and that's sort of stopping up some of the seats, et cetera, how do we even know that our succession plan is still current? How do we know that people still want to move to these seats? How do we know that people don't want different experiences? Are there ways that we can even re-engineer the model of our business, right? Like, in what ways are we future-proofing the business now that we have the ability to not be in shuffle? And that's, to your point earlier about COVID, I think that's one of the ways that COVID was really beneficial, because it gave us, those of us who really took the time to take it in, it gave us a time to think about what questions do we need to be asking ourselves for the next 5 to 10 years about talent, about the structure, the infrastructure of the business, that in moments of steady, we can actually get really creative as leadership teams.
Yeah. I think you can also plan for that, because I think most high-performing leaders that have a lot of potential, they're curious by nature.
Yes.
And they might say, hey, I love this. I feel pretty good. I'm somewhere between excellent and competent.
Yep.
I would love to go deeper with this. And
yes, right.
just finding somebody in another industry that we know, that we've met some other way, that could you do some shadowing with them? And
absolutely.
But I think even some of those cases, that might be even better than a different title or 500%. Even more money. Like 500%. Most of the time, at that stage, everyone will take more money, but money's not driving the behavior, right?
No. And that's a mistake I believe that we've not talked enough about, is the higher you get in these roles, the money is what it is, and you can get it wherever, because you've got the reputation, you've got the professional equity. Like, jumping across positions and making more money, that's actually not hard. But you really start to value your employer for the experiences they give you. And that's what we get to be smart about, to say, what experiences are we giving team members here? Yeah.
Well, you just mentioned, let's go talk to the people.
Let's talk to the people.
That should be somewhere in the top 5 things, or on a side of a big 6-sided dice, where you're like, I'm not sure what we should do. You just roll the dice, and then 1 out of 6 times, let's just talk to the people.
I love it. I'm going to make a shirt.
You and I collaborated several years ago on a consulting engagement that I had. I brought in your expertise, and it was great working with you. The outcomes were great. But we had a company that had been around for 5 to 6 decades. 100+ employees, had never done any sort of measurement, assessment, survey, asking their employees about the experience of working there. And I think the results were largely what people thought. It was somewhat of a bell curve. A few people would lie down on railroad tracks for this company. A few people were always going to be miserable no matter where they are. And there's a whole bunch of people in the middle, but it was the qualitative feedback that I think had several of the leaders sit back and be like, whoa, that's deep. So maybe talk to us a little bit about to do, not to do. How might you help our audience members who are listening say, dude, we've never done that, or we don't do it enough, or we did? When was that? This was just a couple of years ago. Oh, actually, it was 1996. We should do it more frequently. Give us a little context about the right way to do that.
Yeah, I think, when we think about how we engage employees, one of the challenges that employees always have is that I am not heard, I'm not seen in this space. Even when you've got a legacy company that people would lay on the railroad for you, one of the challenges that leaders are facing is stuff is happening that they never anticipated because they never asked, right? And so, when leaders are thinking about how to engage this process, I think a very easy things like, oh, well, we'll have roundtables, or but have we created the psychological safety for people to be really honest with us is the question that often I ask. To your point, the engagement that we did, we surveyed the entire team, and what may have been surprising or not is like, their feedback, the percentage of feedback was like way beyond average. You know what I mean? And so that was exciting because we were able to get really good feedback. But I think it's about asking people, but it's also about creating a follow-up strategy. And so recently we, did another survey with an organization. But at this point, it's like, all right, what is our 12-month strategy to keep these people engaged? They gave us feedback. And so we followed up by saying, all right, here is what you said. Here is what we took away. Were we right? And so that was a really dynamic. The leader was like, mind blown, because the value that the employees receive, even by hearing back their feedback, they don't know what their peers said, right? And so we kind of demystify this, like, you know what I mean? And so we were able to talk about it. So we did that. We followed up with an opportunity for employees to then opt in for what we called engagement groups. So it's say, hey, we've got 3 strongest areas. We're going to focus even more on them. We're going to lean into what we're doing really well, and we're going to do it even better. And then we've got 3 areas where we want to tighten up a little bit. So we created 6 engagement groups, and we had, I believe it was 20-something% of the workforce opt in to participate. So that was like 60-something people opted in. And the leaders were just like so surprised at how the continuity of the feedback throughout the year. Our turnover, their turnover, I think was 4%. 4% 2 years in a row. Because when you ask people and you tell them what they said and you listen to what they said by doing things differently, it just works. It just works.
I think you brought up a really important point, is that when we talk about surveys and assessment, listening to employees more, it's probably a human reaction in that most people think, I need to prepare for the worst case scenario.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to hear bad news about our culture. I'm going to hear bad news about me as a leader. And we take all this personally. And I think that's really good that leaders do. I think what is underestimated is that the strengths of your organization, things that you need to double down on that will give you this unfair advantage.
Yes.
Keep building on that. That can also come up. And I also think we know this, but sometimes we forget at work, is that one of the beautiful things about life is we meet new people or we learn more about people that surprises the hell out of us.
Absolutely.
Be open to the fact that, you know what, maybe you're underestimating your own people, and be open to that surprise.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing too. I say it all the time. People they're talking anyway, whether you're asking them or not. Like, they're saying what they're saying, right, and they're planning around what they think, feel, and believe. Yeah. Period. Regardless of industry, how long, like, that is happening. When your employees are getting ready to retire, do you know how long they've thought about that? They've thought about it 3 to 6 months in advance. I don't care what they tell you. They have been thinking about it. They've been calling. My philosophy is, let me be part of the conversation. Let's have the conversation together, so that I'm not caught by surprise and I can help you do this well, and so that you get to do this well. And that's a cultural thing. Like, how do we create that culture in the workplace where it's not just by chance I find out that you're retiring or that you're thinking about it? And sometimes in construction industry too, I think because we are so relational and we have been so relational, we just really underestimate the depth of the conversations we're having. Yeah, we do.
For folks that this might trigger something like, okay, lots of different ways we can go about some sort of survey or assessment.
Sure.
What's a reasonable time frame? Because when we started working, I was like, they want to do this.
Yep.
At that point, it was something I hadn't done for a client. So that's why I brought you in. And they were like, all right, here's what we're thinking. Let's roll this out in 3 weeks. In 2 months, we can follow up. And then 2 months after that, we can deliver on all the promises. We can knock this thing out in 6 months.
Yeah, no.
And I was like, I don't know, but I have a feeling that seems a little aggressive.
Yeah.
And I realize there's a million different variables.
Sure.
What should be some sort of reasonable time frame? Yep. So maybe it's say you got 100 people. Let's just do that.
Yep.
What sort of time frame should people be thinking about to set the expectation about this is how long this will it will take to do it right?
Yeah, I would say no less than a 9 to 12 month. Okay. And here's why. Employees have hope fatigue within organizations where they have told us things, they have said things, and we've not addressed them in the ways that they hope that we would. And they're disappointed, right? And so when we think about getting feedback, we have to be very diligent about how we're going to address so that we don't get them into this hope. Doing surveys not well can have a huge impact on morale, huge. And so typically what I think about is like, hey, all right, when a client comes to me, I'm like, let's do at least a 30 to 45 day head start, right? Because I want to actually prepare people. We want to prepare people. We want to build rapport with people. We have templates that we do that. Like leaders can start sending out. We do like mini town halls. Like, here's why we want the feedback. Here's what we plan to do with the feedback. Let's tell people the truth. Like, they need to know. We do the survey. We give people a week to do the survey. Like, we give people a week to do the survey. Typically, we take 2 to 3 weeks for the analysis. And then we have another town hall to say, hey, here's what you said. Here are the areas that we identified. We typically do a leaders meeting before that. So leaders have time to sort of digest it. And that's kind of like the cadence. And typically after that, we really invite people into the space of being engaged in how we want to address. Again, I am a fan of doubling down on what we do well. Like, if this is what we do well, let's do even more of it. And what we saw with this particular organization, I mean, huge financial gains. I'm not even lying. Like, huge, because people are like, oh, we do that well, don't we? And so now we're running even faster. And the dopamine that comes with doing something we do well even more, you know what I mean? The engagement, it just happens very naturally. But then also helping employees be a part of the solution for things that we've not gotten right. The appreciation, the gratitude, and the engagement on that side, it was, it cannot be quantified. It cannot be.
Yeah. And for those that might be listening and thinking, oh my God, it sounded like it was going to be a simple process. The way you described it seems like it's a lot of work. And I would go back to what you just said is these people are having the conversations already. Whether you like it or not,
period.
This is happening. Do you want to be part of that conversation or not?
That's it. Yep.
And again, if we're going to talk about recruiting and retention and how big that is and hard it is, keeping the talented people that you have.
That's right.
And making an investment in that.
That's right.
And I've just had so many people that are like, I don't know. I hear the numbers about the cost of turnover. I'm not sure if I agree with them. I said, well, what if we just did some back of the napkin math? You and I. Like, let's just do it.
Yep.
But it's also one of those things where like, I don't even really want to know because it might be a really big number.
500%.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like a big number though. It's. I think the reason people don't believe the numbers is because they can't physically see it.
There's no invoice to be paid.
There's no invoice to be paid.
$75,000 for losing the guy who.
500%.
Yeah.
But coming from talent management, I can tell you the number it's real.
Yeah.
But the number to keeping our people, again, like, you do one of these surveys for however many thousands of dollars you do it, but you just saved potentially 20% of your workforce because at any given time, 20 to 30% of your workforce are attempting to think through other options for their career.
Yes.
And that's actually what the survey data tells us. That survey data literally tells us consistently that 20 to 30% of your people are 1 foot out the door. And so it's like, well, you multiply that by their salaries. And then by the time it takes to recruit new people, that's very simple math.
I'm going to tell all my employees I love them too.
You should.
Maybe I haven't said it enough. But that point is, whether you get a team of 10 or 100 or 1,000, the math is going to be right.
The math is the math.
And I think there's a healthy paranoia where I got a team of 5. I don't think that. Well, you know what? Just tell them you love them anyway.
Just do it, yeah. Well, and even if one person is thinking that, Bradley, right? And sometimes it's not even because of what we are doing or not doing. It's because life is life. And so it's natural attrition too. But yeah, it's like, one out of 5 always.
Yeah. You mentioned in episode 81, which you were part of, which all of a sudden feels like a lifetime ago.
I was like, you're like 300 plus now.
It was, I think it was July 2019, which at one level feels like relatively close to now. On the other hand, like I don't remember doing it. I guess I did. We went to the Omni Hotel.
We do, yes.
You had mentioned that on strong teams that have been around each other for a while, there is and you used it in, I think, the positive sense. There's also a negative sense to it. You said that something to the effect of, after a while, we become desensitized to, and kind of fill in the blank. And what you had said was, I think we become, in some cases, desensitized to how really strong individuals that we work with are, or they're experts at this certain thing. Mm-hmm. I was also thinking there's also the risk of just being desensitized to the way that Catherine always describes the way that she's struggling with this and that.
Yeah.
And I think that happens. I mean, it's a trade-off that comes with strong teams. That desensitization. Is that a word? Whatever it is.
Yep, you got it.
Help me out here.
Desensitization.
What do we do if that's a risk? I'm like, oh, I do love the people I work with. They're really strong. I hope we stay together. And I have probably become desensitized a little bit. How might you approach that if you're coming from the outside to help a team?
Yeah, so, we work with subculture all the time because subculture is actually very strong for, micro and macro culture, right? And to your point, Bradley, I do think there is a time in which teams operate, the best way I can put this is like abnormally, but it's become normal. Right, we sort of normalize the trauma of these meetings. You know what I mean? Or we normalize the angst that comes with the meeting, and it's just like, well, that's just how Bradley is. But that actually is wasting our time, which is actually wasting our money. You know what I mean? And so typically when we come in, we do a team assessment. We get in there. I told you I'm a partner with the 5 behaviors, and we really work on. What does it look like for us to trust each other? What does commitment look like in this space? What does accountability look like in this space? How do we value results? And then what are the accelerants and the barriers to getting those things? And what we've seen, it reinvigorates teams to sort of tap back in to what I like to call the new phase, right? Where we are all running really fast towards the same things. But also we're all very aware of how maybe we've been limiting our own progress. And I think it's really powerful for us to do. But sometimes, to your point, organizations that have had teams for long periods of time, it's like, this is just, we're a great team. This is just how we roll. It's like, and what if we were better?
Yeah, I think it's just that every now and then holding up a mirror to how did we get here? Like, this is who we've become.
Yeah.
I think sometimes this happens where this is happening with our kids, as our kids transition from being little kids to now my kid is taller than me.
Wow.
And I'm like, he's a different person than he was, yet I'm still probably treating him like he was 12. He's not. He's 16. He's driving. He's got a lot of autonomy, and it scares the hell out of me. Yeah. And recently having that mirror kind of showing up like, are you still treating him differently? And then it's like, oh, okay, I can change. I know what I need to do, or at least I know the direction I need to go. Sometimes that's much harder to do in a work environment. Is it possible to do that without bringing in someone like Catherine from the outside to say, hey, what you guys just did there, like, that ain't cool.
That ain't cool.
It seems like it's cool because everybody kind of accepted this, but that's not right, is it?
Yeah. Well, it's so funny that you talk about that because I think that typically, what I know to be true is what got us here won't get us there.
Yeah.
And that's just good business mantra. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, to your point of, do you have to bring in someone? No. If you're astute enough to understand that we've been rolling this way, but if we've not refreshed anything, if we've not gone back to the table to say, even what is our team's strategy for getting good work done? I mean, that's the work. And if you can do that internally, then I think that's really powerful and can be really amazing. Often what I see is that we don't have the internal expertise or we don't have the internal accountability that is equitable and fair. And it can get lopsided really quickly when we try to hold each other accountable because, we're managing the politics of these relationships always, right? And so the benefit of bringing someone into the outside is like, I'm not married to any of this, and I really don't understand it the way that you guys are probably feeling it. And so I'm really objective in like how I give feedback and how we move forward. But if we have the ability to do that internally while maintaining psychological safety, that's really powerful.
It reminds me of that Einstein quote, Abe Lincoln, I don't know, on the internet. One of those guys said everything, but it's like the same level of thinking that got you into the problem.
Yes.
Is not going to be the same level of thinking that's going to get you out of it.
That's right. Or may not even be able the same level of thinking that can recognize there's a problem.
Yes, exactly. Yep. So I want to make sure we hit on this.
Okay.
You have helped a lot of leaders who found themselves, we'll just say it, middle-aged white guy who says, hey, as we think deeply and we take a really candid assessment of where we are in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we realize that maybe I'm in a construction company and we have an awful lot of really talented craft workers who are pouring concrete and doing forms. Yeah. We need more of them. But if I'm being honest, and I'm looking throughout the hierarchy of our organization, if there's someone at the bottom who's saying, how do I get to the top? There's nobody at the top who looks like them.
Yep.
Or, maybe it's a different organization that's in lumber and building materials. And they're saying, ooh, really, it's kind of a family-run operation.
Yeah.
But we haven't done a good job of having our leadership or our employees reflect the customers we serve.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How have you worked with leaders to say, listen, there's no shame in this, there's no guilt in this. Yeah. However, if you recognize there's a need to change, how do we take a step back and look at what we're trying to do with a new lens and choose to move forward in a different way?
Yeah.
How do you help people do that?
Yeah, I think one of the ways that we've worked through this is deciding our why and being clear on why. Like, why is this important to us? Why do we care about it? What value do we see? One of the key value points is kind of going back to this conversation of succession. The drought of talent in many cases is because we've not created an environment that says we welcome people who are other or people who are different. The global population, those numbers are real too, right? And so as we choose not to, because it is a choice, as we choose not to expand our culture to be thoughtfully accepting of other people, we're talking about gender, we're talking about multi-generational, all these different things, racial, et cetera, then we're literally cutting off the talent pipe. And so it's like going back to choose your problem. Is that the problem we want to have? Or do we want to start working on this so that our organization is always able to keep up with the growing demand of it? I mean, the industry is changing. What we're seeing in the construction industry, it's changing, right? Like who's getting bids and how they're getting these bids. And we want to be a part of those conversations, don't we? And so it's just smart business for us to think about, okay, let's do this because we want to do the right thing and because we know that there are other people who are talented. And so also let's do an internal assessment of where are we not thoughtful in how we make space for women and how we make space for people who are Hispanic or Latino or Black. You know what I mean? And so I think it's just very fair that we put up the mirror first. Typically the initial reaction is, let's go recruit. And I'm like, whoa. Because to recruit and our internal temperature not be what it needs to be, that's not fair. And typically my leaders are like, Catherine, I'm not racist. I'm like, I know, because like we do this, right? And I know that you're not racist, and I get all that, and I know that you're not a sexist, and all the, and I get all of that. But it also lends to us believing and trusting that there's some internal experiences that are unintentionally created that actually would not be welcoming to other people. And so let's do our work first, and let's sort of assess what we've got here, and let's kind of create a plan to be thoughtful about how we start to turn our own Titanic. And then as we do that, the pool actually sort of happens for us.
I think that's really well said. This idea that there might be unintentional situations or circumstances that we have created.
Absolutely.
And we can take intentional steps to change them.
To uncreate them, yeah.
That's it, right?
Period,
I think also it's kind of this insight to the obvious. What's the why? Because I've had some conversations recently where guys will say, hey, we really have to do something with DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah.
I'll say, just curious why. And they're like, well, I mean, it's self-evident. It's at every conference and every podcast, and it's all over the place.
Yeah. But why do you want to do it?
And our competitors are doing it.
Yeah.
And then I'll say, is that the why? Because everybody else is doing it.
Yeah.
I think we know this throughout childhood. That's often not a great reason to do it. Now, I do think if we probably unpack that, there are some business reasons that if you want to rely on that, or you look at your customer base or some other moral and ethical reasons that you'd like to, I think they're there. But until you get there, just because our competitors are doing it, probably not a great reason to do it.
Probably not the best. Well, and the reason it's not the best is because as very, very talented, underestimated, and underrepresented men and women are coming to the table, they've got questions. And they don't want to be a part of companies that are not serious about supporting their growth. And they're asking hard questions. And we've got to be, as an organization, convicted in our why so that we can share those responses very candidly and very truthfully. Otherwise, again, when we go back to this, oh, I can't find anybody, it's because they're asking questions and they don't like your answer. You know what I mean? And so we've got to be very intentional, very thoughtful about, all right, what is our why? And that why expands. I mean, I'll tell you, as I've worked with leaders, you know, that why it expands. And I love to see the expansion of it because it becomes personal for a lot of leaders to say, oh, I see how I've potentially caused harm in this space unintentionally. And let's be honest, like I grew up in this industry where as a Black woman, like I've always mostly been the only one. And I worked with really great guys, you know, like I hope no one takes this the wrong way, but like white men have raised me in this industry. You know what I mean? Seriously, you know what I mean? Have taught me everything I know and understand. Yeah. And as the exchange has happened, I've taught them a lot too. And we've expanded the way we do business together. And even that dynamic of a relationship has been incredibly powerful for how they lead, for how I lead. So there is so much benefit to unpack about what happens when we become professionally relational and bring other to the table.
Yeah, it's been interesting to talk to people. Some have voiced it, some haven't, but it's some version of, I feel guilty. Should I feel guilty?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I feel guilty. Do I feel shame? Don't I? Should I? And then I'm like, what have I done? I've done my best, and I've tried to support these people. I've tried to grow this to help the community. I'm like, hey.
Whoa.
I'm like, but to your point, hey, whatever happened, it's in the past.
Yeah.
Let's live in the moment.
Yes.
What do you want? Why do you want it? And what do you want to be in the future? And can we take intentional steps to get there? Yeah,
Bradley, I mean, you said something that I say all the time. I'm like, as a society, we are dealing with the residue of decisions we did not make. However, the lack of making decision moving forward is the choice on our part. And we are either upholding or accelerating or mitigating the continued barriers. We just get to choose at this point what side of the table we want to sit on. Yeah. All
right. I'm watching the time here. I want to ask you, you, my friend.
Hi.
You've got a lot going on. Got a lot of stuff going on.
Always.
Husband's in different things. He's working full time.
Oh, yeah.
You got a couple adorable kiddos.
I do.
You got some franchise opportunity.
Yep.
People are inviting you to speak. You got a consulting business.
Yeah.
Tell me about time management a little bit, because I don't have half as much stuff as you got going on.
You got a lot of stuff.
And I feel like I need to do a better job. So how do you manage your time? How do you figure out how to put the first things first? How do you do it?
I make choices all the time. I'm making choices. No, I do. I believe in the power of choice. I teach my kids. I mean, it's like for every choice you make, you're not choosing something else. And so it's like, what is the most important thing in front of you? And like, what needs your attention right now? Like this morning, I'm like, this is what I'm doing. And this is important to me, et cetera, right? When I leave here, I'm like, okay, what is the most important next thing? And I know that sounds really like, that doesn't sound like a strategy or a plan, but I'm always assessing like, what is the most important thing and what do I need to focus on next? A lot of times my kids are that. You know, yesterday I made a choice to stop working and to take a nap because they were coming home and I wanted to go play with them. And I was like, I don't have energy to play though if I don't take a nap. So, you know, it's always making a choice. And I go back to what we started with. It's like, what is the bottleneck and what am I going to get the greatest impact from? And I'm always assessing impact that way, Bradley.
Yeah, I heard somebody say, or I read somewhere like, can you have it all? Yeah, you can have it all. You just can't have it all at the same time.
That's it. That's it. You can. Yeah, and I don't believe in like work-life balance. I believe in work-life compatibility. You know what I mean? Like, how do I make my work compatible with my life? Which means for me sometimes that I work late at night when everybody's asleep, but it doesn't feel like, I don't know, you read all these books and stuff and everybody's like, oh, well, I don't know. I can't read a book that's going to tell me, I mean, advice, yes, and I love it, but at the same time, it's like, what feels and flow to me? Like what feels good to me, and I just happen to work really well at 11 p.m.
Okay, that's good. All right, I want to make it really clear where people can learn more about you. Would you be open to if someone's like, She sounds awesome. I learned a lot from this. You open to accepting links or connections on LinkedIn?
Yes.
And then tell us about your website. Like, what is the next action for people that want to learn more about you and continue to learn from you?
Yeah, I love to connect on LinkedIn. I think it's super easy for the people in our industry to just like tap a connect button and send me a message. So please do that. Catherine L. Wheeler, and it's Catherine with a C. Pivot 180, pivot spelled out.com is where you can find out more about the consulting business. But
So, sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Pivot 180. So ONEEIGHTY. So literally spell it out.
yes, PIVOT.
Correct.
ONE
And
EIGHTY.
not Pivot 360. No,
Not Pivot 360.
We're not going to bring you
because
back
that
around.
would be really weird. Yeah. And also, like, people tend to just email me, and that works too because we're all like really busy business people. So Catherine at pivot180.com. Super easy.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, you know I love you.
Same,
I love
Bradley.
you making time to come to the show. I always learn from talking to you. So
Same.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, friends. Hopefully you found my conversation with Catherine Wheeler of Pivot 180 to be worth your time and attention. I know your time, attention, and energy are all finite resources, so thank you for listening or watching. So if you're just listening to this as a podcast, you are missing out on some of the other value that we are trying to provide by putting this in video. So go ahead to YouTube, look up Bradley Hartman & Co., and you will see my conversation. Also, we slice and dice it to put it into smaller bite-sized chunks that makes it easier to share with your team. Learn more at YouTube, again, Bradley Hartman & Co. And if you did get value from this, I would encourage you to reach out on LinkedIn to Catherine Wheeler. Also, reviews on whatever podcast player that you are listening to, those mean more to us than you know as we try to reach a larger audience and help more people. So if you can do that for us, I would appreciate it. This episode was brought to you by the Simple Sales Pipeline. Under $30 a month, under 30 minutes a month, we can organize and value every single sales person's pipeline. You should absolutely do this. Go to thesimpleSalesPipeline.com. All right, friends, that's all I've got. Thank you for listening. If you have ways that we can improve this podcast audio or video topics or guests, or you're struggling with any challenges that you would like us to address in the form of an asking for a friend episode, you can email me directly at bradley@bradleyhartmanandco.com. All right, friends, that's all I've got. I'm done. We're going to close out with our leadership mantra. You, my friend, are owed nothing. Deliver value first. Make it a great week.